She screamed in front of everyone, "That's my daughter's inheritance." But it wasn't hers anymore. I bought the estate her family stole a century ago, and tonight, the truth finally screams back. I still remember the scream echoing through the hills that night. Halloween lights flickered, and Karen's voice ripped through the quiet like thunder. She stood at my gate in her red silk robe, clutching a wine glass, screaming, "That's my daughter's inheritance," as if the words could rewrite history. Cameras from the HOA security van captured everything: the gate lights, the shocked neighbors, and her shaking finger pointed at me like I'd stolen her soul. I had just unveiled the fully restored cabin, a 100-year-old estate I'd bought for $120 million, once forgotten, now glowing with golden chandeliers. Her scream froze the air, and for a moment, I felt a strange mix of guilt and satisfaction. Both of us had history with that land. The reporters arrived within an hour, flashing lights as Karen collapsed dramatically on her driveway, shouting about betrayal, legacy, and ghosts. That night, I realized old money never dies. It just changes owners. But Karen couldn't handle watching me rebuild what her family destroyed. I didn't buy the estate for pride. I bought it for closure, something Beverly Hills doesn't sell, not even for $120 million. The past I buried under those oak floors was about to rise again, louder than her screams, sharper than her hatred. Before we go on, please, where are you watching from and what time is it right now? I want to see how many families, parents, and neighbors are feeling this story across the country tonight. Your comment helps this message reach more people who've faced unfair HOA rules too. As the police escorted her away, I whispered to myself, this isn't about inheritance, it's about justice. And justice was finally mine. 30 years earlier, I was just a landscaper's son mowing lawns in the same neighborhood where Karen's family owned 3 mansions and ignored people like me. I remember their old cabin, abandoned but hauntingly beautiful, hidden behind ivy and rusted gates, a piece of history her family pretended didn't exist. Her father, Mr. Darnell, had promised to restore it, but greed swallowed that dream. Instead, they tore down trees and built pools of champagne. When I was 17, I worked on that property, cutting weeds while Karen, then a spoiled 20-year-old, mocked me for smelling like grass. She'd throw parties near the cabin ruins, calling it haunted, but I saw its bones, oak beams older than any of us, filled with forgotten stories. My father told me once, one day, you'll own more than they can imagine. Just keep working. Keep dreaming. I didn't believe him then. When the recession hit, Karen's family lost half their holdings. The cabin was auctioned quietly, listed as uninhabitable land. I never forgot. I promised myself if I ever made enough, I'd bring it back, not just to restore wooden walls, but to heal a wound from my youth. Years later, when I made my fortune in architecture, that same cabin came back into the listings, like fate knocking on my door. And on Halloween Day, I bought it, signing the papers with trembling hands as if I was reclaiming a stolen chapter of my life. The first time I stepped into that century-old ruin, it felt alive, dust dancing through sunlight, floorboards creaking like whispers of the dead. Every corner smelled of old pine and secrets. I could almost hear laughter, arguments, and the music of a world long gone. The locals called it cursed. They said Karen's great-grandfather built it on stolen land, swindling a veteran's widow who died heartbroken. That story haunted me. Maybe that's why her family never touched it again. Too much guilt, too much truth beneath the marble and lies. The roof sagged, the porch was devoured by vines, and the fireplace was filled with bird nests, but I saw potential, something beautiful beneath decay. As I laid my hand on a cracked window frame, I whispered, "You've waited long enough." I didn't realize how right those words were. Restoration began that winter. Every nail, every beam, every stone was treated like a piece of living memory. I even found letters sealed in a tin box under the floor, love letters from 1923, signed by a woman named Eleanor Darnell. One line read, "If our love must die in silence, let the house remember." That line burned in my chest for weeks. When I showed them to Karen later, she denied everything. But I saw fear in her eyes. The past was clawing its way back. 3 months into the restoration, Karen appeared at my gate like an uninvited storm, hair tied too tight, lips red as warning lights. She sneered, "You think you can rewrite our family's story?" Her voice carried the same arrogance I remembered from decades ago. I offered her tea. She called it pity. I called it civility. Some ghosts need kindness before exorcism. She claimed the land was never truly sold, that her family's inheritance rights still held under historical estate law. But I had the deed, notarized and framed in mahogany. The truth was legal even if her pride wasn't. She laughed coldly, "You're just a gardener who got lucky." That one sentence cut deeper than it should have. I didn't reply. I just stared at the restored stone fireplace where her ancestors' initials were once carved. History has no loyalty, it only remembers truth. Before leaving, she pointed at the cabin and said, "If you open those doors on Halloween, something bad will happen." Her warning wasn't about superstition. It was about revenge. And I knew that night would be her breaking point. As she walked away, I realized something chilling. She wasn't protecting history. She was protecting a secret buried under it. 2 weeks before Halloween, my restoration crew found something strange beneath the cabin floor. An old steel safe, rusted but sealed tight. It took hours to open, and inside were documents, photos, and ledgers marked Darnell Trust Holdings, 1925. The papers exposed everything: land stolen from veterans, illegal bonds, and handwritten deals signed by Karen's great-grandfather. Worse, one ledger mentioned a woman named Eleanor and her unpaid inheritance, the same name from the love letters I found earlier. I pieced it together. Eleanor was the widow who was cheated, and her love affair with Mr. Darnell was covered up by lies. The cabin wasn't their inheritance, it was her revenge, immortalized in wood and silence. As I read those words, the wind outside howled like her spirit finally waking up after a century of being ignored. I felt a weight lift from the air, as if justice was whispering through the cracks of old wood. I stored the papers safely, knowing this evidence could destroy Karen's entire claim and the HOA's empire built on fraud. But something told me not to reveal it yet. Sometimes, you let ghosts do their haunting before you deliver their peace. Days before Halloween, I received a notice from the HOA, signed by Karen herself as acting president. Unauthorized reconstruction. Property under review. It was a trap. They wanted to stop my grand reopening and reclaim the estate under heritage preservation rights. When I arrived at the meeting, Karen sat like a queen behind her board, smirking as if justice was her crown. She said, "You've awakened things that should have stayed buried." I replied, "You mean the truth?" The room fell silent. The other members avoided my gaze. They feared her, but they also knew the truth was closing in. I laid out the deed, renovation permits, and restoration proofs, each signed by the City and Heritage Department. Then I dropped the real bombshell: copies of the Darnell ledgers. Gasps filled the hall like thunder before a storm. Karen's face drained of color. She stammered, "Those are fake." But the HOA lawyer confirmed their authenticity on the spot. That night, they suspended her presidency pending investigation. She stormed out, her pride bleeding faster than her reputation. And yet, I knew she wouldn't stop. Some people would rather burn the past than face it in daylight. The air in Beverly Hills that Halloween felt heavy, as if history itself was holding its breath. The cabin glowed with warm lights and jazz music. I invited everyone, neighbors, journalists, even the mayor, to witness the rebirth of a century-old treasure. But as guests arrived, I noticed a shadow near the gate. Karen, watching from her car, glass of wine trembling in her hand. I ignored her, stepping onto the stage to give my speech about restoration, forgiveness, and truth. I said, "Some homes hold more than memories, they hold justice waiting to be restored." The crowd clapped, flashes from cameras filling the night. Then, just as I unveiled the restored plaque, firecrackers exploded near the old oak tree. Screams, chaos, smoke. Karen rushed forward, shouting, "You stole my family's life." The crowd froze, and someone began filming. She grabbed the microphone and screamed, "That's my daughter's inheritance," over and over like a broken record of hate. Her voice cracked, her mascara ran, and the night that should have marked my triumph became her public unraveling. The police led her away again. And this time, I didn't feel anger, just pity. Some ghosts never want peace. By dawn, the video had gone viral. A Karen meltdown in Beverly Hills Halloween gala. Millions watched her rage while I stood silent beside the glowing cabin. Reporters camped outside, calling it the $120 million scandal that exposed old money's ugliest secrets. The HOA board resigned within a week, facing fraud charges from the documents I'd released to the city attorney. Karen's family trust collapsed, their assets frozen, and her mansion listed for sale. Justice was loud, but peace was quiet. I spent that morning walking through the cabin barefoot, feeling the restored would hum beneath my feet like a living soul finally at rest. I found one last note tucked in the wall, Eleanor's handwriting again. Truth survives those who fear it. For the first time in decades, I smiled without guilt. The land had chosen its rightful peacekeeper. I poured myself a cup of coffee, watching sunlight fill the same window I'd first touched a year ago. Outside, the oak trees swayed gently, no longer burdened by secrets. And I whispered, "Rest now, Eleanor. It's finally over." 2 months later, a luxury developer offered $180 million for the estate, calling it Hollywood's most historic redemption property. Everyone told me to sell, friends, lawyers, even my accountant. But I couldn't. Some things aren't measured in profit. I met the buyer anyway, a young woman named Lily. She introduced herself nervously as Karen's daughter. My heart stopped. She said softly, "I'm not here to reclaim it. I just want to see where it all went wrong." Her voice trembled with humility.